Good afternoon. We're going to talk today about some of the research that you collected on birth order. And in the course of that, we'll look at issues of gender and um, we'll look at stereotypes and also some of the difficulties in doing some research. So remember in chapter 7, we talked about the role of, or we talked about three ideas: stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination. Stereotypes are simple beliefs, they're concepts helping us to understand a situation or what we're doing in a particular setting. Prejudice adds on some attitude. So it's not just that um, boys are more active, perhaps, but that we look at boys as being more active and say that's either good or bad. And then discrimination is our action on that. And what we're saying here is um, boys are more active, that's good, therefore they should have access to these sorts of resources. Obviously, stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination don't necessarily fit together. Now, can you ask people whether they're prejudiced and expect an honest answer? And this is certainly the kind of concern that has plagued psychology, because psychologists want to know about prejudice and stereotypes. And yet, people often aren't honest in certain kinds of situations. And, if you take more psychology courses, you'll see that we really are concerned about self report sometimes. That sometimes people say what they think the other person wants to hear, and what they say may not be accurate. So we can ask, that's an explicit measure, or we can do one of a number of different kinds of implicit measures. I believe in chapter 7, I gave you the IAT and suggested that you might want to take it. If you haven't taken it yet, it's really an interesting measure, controversial measure, but interesting. This birth order survey that I gave you is also an implicit measure. It's not coming out directly and saying, what do you think about males and females? Although it often leaks very clearly. So you asked your participants, would you, if you had only one child, would you want it to be a boy or a girl? And obviously some people said, oh, don't make me think about that. But people eventually did. The clear majority of men said, if I have only one child, I want it to be a boy. This was much more split for girls. And here's another way of looking at that in this figure. Girls, pretty much equivalent. Boys, men, um, had that strong preference. So let's think about why there was this difference. So men and women tended to talk about daughters as being more difficult to raise, boys being, their sons, they expected to be easier to raise. They often talked about issues of girls being more, their lives being more filled with drama. Some of them were more direct and said, I'm concerned about, about menstruation periods. They probably were also more concerned about their daughters becoming pregnant. I think that may be sort of under the surface of what many people were saying. So boys are easy to raise, girls are difficult to raise. Some people talked about wanting a mini me. And that was both men and women who said that. Some people also uh, talked about wanting a boy in order to carry on um, the family name. So the issue becomes a little bit more complicated when we're talking about two children. So what you'll see here is that most people want both a male and a female. That's perhaps not surprising. Another thing that you see is that a majority of people, of the people who don't want both a male and a female, say, I want one just like me. That's a much stronger tendency for men. And I think that we can think about that in two ways, that we're seeing both the male preference and the same as me preference. So let's look at it in a figure. Here we're seeing percentages, and you see that very strong preference for a same sex child, particularly among men, um, and that both males and females want a male first. Certainly, a greater percentage of girls, of women, want a male first. But part of that is that when we're talking about percentages, these two, we might think about these sort of going together. Now, comparing these with each other, you see that many more people want a son first than a daughter first. So let's think about what's going on here. I think um, as people were talking about what gendered children they wanted and why, many people said if they wanted a boy first, I want a boy first to protect his younger sister. I wish that I had had a brother to take care of me. Um, in terms of daughter first, often it was the same sort of explanation, except framed in terms of gender stereotypes. So many people said, I want a girl first because I want her to take care of her younger brother. Okay, so just those differences in expectations. Now, with one of my other classes, I've asked them about a third child. And across time, across three children, the preference for males declines. So if we add up everybody, it's about equal. Um, that's assuming that people get to a third child. Okay. And obviously, most people do not have three children anymore. Now, one of the things you'll see throughout this course is that there's a lot of variability. And so that's another reason why I asked you to do this research, that I wanted you to see this variability. Not all men said, I want two boys. A lot did, but not all did. And not all women said, I want to have a boy first and then a girl. A lot did. So, as we're thinking about males and females, as we're thinking about human behavior, recognize that there are both patterns and there are also differences in those patterns. And take care. Bye bye.